Imagine hiking deep into the mountains and realizing someone may have been watching you from the trees. Deep in Australia's Victorian high country, hikers have whispered about a strange figure moving through the wilderness. A man who seemed to appear where no one expected him. A man said to know the mountains better than almost anyone alive. Some called him harmless. Others said he was someone you never wanted to meet alone in the bush. And over time, the stories around him grew darker. Until one question started following his name. Was the Button Man a real danger? Or did fear turn one mysterious bushman into a legend? Welcome back to the channel. This is Echoes and Oddities. I'm Ivy, and today we have another story from our Bizarre Lunchtime Tales series. Bite-sized, strange stories you can listen to on your lunch break. Today we're heading into Australia's Victorian high country, where hikers, campers, and locals have shared alleged sightings of a mysterious bushman known only as the Button Man. Over the years, his name has been connected to eerie encounters, whispered warnings, and the kind of mountain folklore that makes you wonder how much of the story is real and how much was created by fear. So by the end of this one, I want you to tell me, do you think the Button Man is real, fake, or legend? To understand why the story of the Button Man spread the way it did, you first have to understand the place where the legend grew. The Victorian high country is not the kind of wilderness you casually wander into without a plan. It is rugged. It is remote. And in some areas, it can feel like the modern world has completely fallen away. There are mountain tracks, thick stretches of bushland, old huts, campsites, and valleys where the silence can feel almost too heavy. One wrong turn, one sudden change in weather, one missed trail marker, and a peaceful hike can turn into something much more dangerous. So when stories began spreading about a mysterious man living out there in the bush, someone who allegedly knew the land better than most people ever could, it did not take much for fear to grow. Because in a place like that, the idea of being lost is already frightening. But the idea of being lost and realizing someone else may be out there watching, that is the kind of story people remember. The man at the center of this story was not some monster from an old folktale. He was a real person. A bushman who reportedly spent much of his time deep in the Victorian high country, living far away from the noise and comfort of everyday life. And depending on who you ask, he was either a harmless loner, a skilled survivalist, or one of the creepiest figures people claim to encounter in the Australian bush. He became known as the Button Man because, according to local stories, he carved buttons from deer antlers. It was such a strange and specific detail that the nickname stuck. And over time, that name started to travel. Campers talked about him. Hikers whispered about him. Locals repeated stories about a mysterious man moving through the mountains, sometimes appearing near campsites, sometimes watching from a distance, and sometimes showing up in places where people did not expect to see anyone at all. Now, this is where the story gets tricky, because when you hear a name like the Button Man, and you picture a man living alone in the wilderness, carving buttons from antlers, walking through the bush like he belongs to the land itself, it is very easy for the imagination to take over. One strange sighting becomes a warning. One unsettling encounter becomes a rumor. And before long, a man who may have simply chosen a life away from society becomes something much bigger. A mystery, a threat, a legend. But what made people so afraid of him was not just that he lived in the mountains. It was what people started connecting to his name. The fear around the Button Man did not come from one single story. It came from layers. A strange sighting here, a whispered warning there, a hiker who claimed they saw someone watching from the trees, a camper who felt like they were not alone. And in the Victorian high country, where the bush is thick, the weather can shift, and the mountains can swallow sound, those stories had the perfect place to grow. Because the truth is, remote wilderness already plays tricks on people. A snapping branch can sound like footsteps. A shadow between the trees can look like a person. And when you are far from help, with no houses nearby and no easy way out, your mind starts asking questions it might not ask anywhere else. Was that just an animal? Was that someone walking? Did I really see a man standing there? Or am I imagining it? That is the kind of fear that followed the button man. People said he knew the land better than almost anyone. They said he could move through the bush quietly, appear near campsites, and disappear back into the trees like he was part of the mountain itself. And once a person becomes known like that, every strange moment in the wilderness starts to feel connected to them. If hikers heard something outside their tent, maybe it was him. If someone saw movement near a trail, maybe it was him. If a camper had an uncomfortable encounter with a stranger, maybe it was the button man. But then the rumors grew even darker, because in that same region, there had been missing hikers, dangerous terrain, and cases where people entered the mountains and did not come home the way their families expected. And when people are scared, they look for a face to attach to that fear. They want a reason. They want a person. They want someone to blame. So the legend of the button man became more than just a story about a strange man in the bush. It became a question. Was he simply a loner who made people uncomfortable because he lived differently? Or was there something more dangerous hiding behind the stories? And that is where this case gets murky. And this is where we have to slow down for a second. Because the button man is one of those stories where fact, fear, rumor, and internet legend all start blending together. Yes, there are stories about him. Yes, there have been alleged sightings. And yes, people in the area have talked about him in a way that sounds deeply unsettling. But that does not mean every scary thing said about him is true. Over time, his name became tangled up with disappearances, missing hikers, and the natural danger of the Victorian high country itself. And once that happened, the legend got harder to separate from reality. Because when someone goes missing in a remote place, people naturally start asking questions. Was it the weather? Was it the terrain? Was it an accident? Did they get lost? Or was someone else involved? And when a mysterious bushman already exists in the same stories people are telling, it becomes very easy for the public imagination to pull him into the mystery. But here is the thing. A remote wilderness does not need a villain to be dangerous. Mountains can be dangerous all by themselves. Cold weather, injury, dehydration, steep terrain, poor visibility, and one wrong turn can become life-threatening fast. And that is why this story is so complicated. Because the button man may have been real. The fear around him may have been real. The alleged sightings may have been real. But the darker version of the story, the version where he becomes some confirmed predator hiding in the mountains, is much harder to prove. And in stories like this, that matters. Because there is a big difference between a person being strange and a person being dangerous. There is a big difference between a man becoming local folklore and a man being guilty of the things people whisper about. So by the time the button man became known online, the story had already turned into something bigger than one man. It became a mountain myth, a warning story, the kind people tell around campsites when the fire is low, the trees are dark, and every sound in the distance feels like it could be footsteps. And maybe that is why the legend lasted. Because the button man was not just scary because of what people claimed he did. He was scary because of what people imagined he could be. And that may be the most unsettling part of this whole story. Because when a person becomes a legend, people stop seeing them clearly. They stop asking, who was this man really? And they start asking, what if every dark rumor was true? That is how folklore grows. Not always from proof. Sometimes it grows from fear. Sometimes it grows from half-told stories, repeated warnings, strange encounters, and the human need to explain what we do not understand. And the button man had all the ingredients of a modern mountain legend. A remote wilderness, a mysterious figure, alleged sightings, missing person rumors, campfire-style stories. and a nickname strange enough to sound like it came from a horror movie. But if we strip away the internet version for a moment, we are left with a more complicated question. Was he truly dangerous? Or was he a man who lived differently, moved through the bush comfortably, and unsettled people because he did not fit neatly into normal society? Because sometimes people who live outside the world we understand become easy targets for stories. If someone is private, people call them secretive. If someone is quiet, people call them suspicious. If someone knows the wilderness too well, people start wondering what else they might be hiding. And in a place as isolated as the Victorian high country, that kind of suspicion can turn into something much darker. One person tells a story. Another person adds a detail. Someone else connects it to a disappearance. Then the internet picks it up. And suddenly, a real man becomes almost impossible to separate from the myth built around him. That does not mean the stories are all fake. It does not mean every alleged encounter should be ignored. But it does mean we have to be careful. Because legends can be powerful. They can warn us. They can fascinate us. They can make us look twice over our shoulder when we are alone in the woods. But they can also swallow the truth. And in the case of the Button Man, the truth may be much less clear than the legend wants us to believe. So what do you think? Was the Button Man real? Fake? Or has the story grown into legend over time? Let me know in the comments. This has been another Bizarre Lunchtime Tale from our Echoes and Oddities podcast. I'm Ivy Monroe. And if you like bite-sized strange stories for your lunch break or when you have a little free time, don't forget to subscribe.